FPV drones unlock the skies in new ways unknown to drone pilots than ever before. Now that pilots have total control over their drones, the amount of different shots that you can capture is countless. But for beginners, that's the issue, isn't it? What types of shots should I always have ready to go in the back of my pocket? And that's what I'm going to answer for you today. So, let's fly. This first shot is counterintuitive, but it's to fly low and close to the ground. Ironically, although FPV drones let you fly through the sky as freely as possible, their best shots come when you're flying as close as you possibly can to a subject. They really make you feel as if you're running through the landscapes.
General tip here, especially if you are a beginner when it comes to manual mode, is to do the shot multiple times, but starting out higher than normal. And as you get more comfortable, you're gonna try to get closer and closer every time you do the shot. This is going to prevent you from crashing your drone straight into the ground right off the bat, because you're gonna have a better feel for how close the landscape actually is to your drone.
You can do this same shot with a normal drone like the Mavic Air 2, but the perspective and the racing feel that you get from the FPV drone because of how it tilts and curves takes this type of shot to a whole nother level. The second shot is something I like to call the boomerang. What you're basically doing is flying up to your subject, then drifting / orbiting around them, and then jetting out in another direction. This shot is a little bit of a reveal shot as well, because you can use flying up to your subject as a little bit of a teaser until you boomerang around your subject to reveal the epic landscape. By the way, your subject can be you standing somewhere, a lone tree or a cliff peak, basically anything that you can use as a point to drift around.
One concept that a lot of beginner FPV pilots have a hard time learning at first is that the FPV drone drifts a lot more than it turns. Your speed and how sharp of an angle you want to swing your camera at is going to determine how much your drone is going to drift. So the boomerang shot is actually a great practice shot because it's going to help you get used to how your particular drone likes to shift its weight in the air. And it's also just a great shot for learning how to keep your subject in the middle of your frame the whole time. Basically, the boomerang shot is a great practice shot for sharpening your control.
This shot has to be my favorite drone shot of all time, the ridge follow. You see it all the time on Instagram Reels or TikTok. Essentially what it is finding a guiding line in your landscape and then following it. Cliff sides or edges of high locations are a good indicator that you'll be able to nicely pull off the shot, but you can also follow rivers and roads and get the same effect. You do want to get as close as possible as you can to the ridge, but it's like I mentioned before, it's safer to do the ridge follow the first few times from a higher position, and then once you're more familiar with the landscape, get closer and closer to it. This next shot is an epic establishing shot if you want to immerse your viewers into your landscape. All you're doing is scaling up a ridge, cliff, hill, building, whatever it is, and then pulling up and around to reveal your view. It's simple and effective. Ridge dives are probably the scariest shots to pull off as a beginner. What you're doing is driving your drone down towards the ground, usually off the side of a cliff or a building, and then leveling out. The best way to practice this shot is to do it in the open air a few times before you go off the side of the cliff. And once you do feel comfortable enough to dive off the edge of a high location, as always, start further away from that edge for the first few times, and then for the next few times, get closer while diving.
Ridge dives are extremely important for you to get familiar with as an FPV pilot. The reason being that the more that you do these ridge dives, the more of an understanding you're going to have about how gravity pushes and pulls at your drone from different heights. And the more you understand that, the more you get a feel for that out in the open air, the more accurate and the more crash proof you are as a flyer.
This move is a variation of the ridge dive. All you're doing is adding a rotate to your dive and then leveling out. It's an extremely dynamic shot that's going to add a little bit of a shock factor to your footage, but most importantly, it's a great introductory move for getting you used to capturing the shots that force you to fly your drone in unusual positions. Now, once you get familiar with doing each of these 6 shots individually, you can start combining them to get absolutely epic shots from multiple perspectives in one flight. For example, one of my favorite combinations is doing a rotating dive and then leveling out very low to the ground. Another example is doing a little bit of a ridge climb to a ridge follow to finish with an epic reveal. This is where you can get extremely creative with your shots and capture the shots that only you can capture with your flying. So go crazy, bro. If you are a beginner, mastering the shots that I shared with you in this video is going to sharpen your skills as an FPV pilot. It's also going to make sure that no matter where you go, you'll be able to get the most of the landscapes that are around you through the footage that you capture. If you want to see how I learned how to fly FPV or what FPV setup that I like to use, I'm gonna leave those videos like somewhere over here. Of course, subscribe. I'd love to have you. And to those of us that love soaring through the skies, it's time to skyrocket.